How Millionaires Ignore the Race. The Psychology of Wealth Beyond Comparison by Wealthy Mindset Audiobooks. There is a moment that comes to everyone, scrolling through your phone, lying awake at night, when you suddenly feel you're falling behind and the world seems to be moving at a speed you cannot match. But the people who build real wealth have learned something that looks like indifference from the outside. They have learned to ignore the race entirely. There is a moment that comes to everyone. You might be scrolling through your phone at the end of a long day, your thumb moving almost unconsciously through images of other people's lives. Or perhaps you are lying awake at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling, your mind spinning through calculations and comparisons you cannot seem to turn off. And in that moment, without warning, you feel it, a tightening in your chest, a whisper of panic that tells you that you are falling behind. The world seems to be moving at a speed you cannot match, on a timeline you cannot meet, toward destinations you were supposed to reach years ago but somehow haven't. Someone you went to school with just bought their second home. You saw the photos, the gleaming kitchen, the backyard where their children play, the life that looks so settled, so complete. A former colleague, someone who used to sit in the cubicle next to yours, is now traveling the world while their business runs itself. They post from beaches and mountain peaks, their face relaxed and smiling, while you are still grinding through emails and wondering when your own break will come. And then there are the strangers on the internet, the ones who seem younger than you, who are celebrating milestones you have not even approached. Financial freedom at 30, retirement at 35, a life of ease and abundance that feels impossibly distant from where you stand. This feeling is not new. It did not begin with social media, though social media has certainly made it unbearable. It did not start with capitalism, though capitalism has learned to profit from it. This feeling is ancient. It is the wound of comparison, and it has been bleeding in every generation since the beginning of human consciousness. Our ancestors felt it when they looked at the neighboring village and saw larger harvests, stronger walls, more prosperous families. We feel it now when we see curated lives on glowing screens. The medium has changed, but the ache remains the same. As the Roman philosopher Seneca once observed, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. And yet we crave, we compare, we measure ourselves against standards we did not set, timelines we did not choose, and definitions of success we never truly questioned. We absorb these measurements so deeply that they feel like truth, like the natural order of things, like the way life is supposed to unfold. And when we do not measure up, we feel the weight of failure, even though we are not entirely sure what we were racing toward in the first place. But here is what most people never discover. The people who build real wealth, not just money, but peace, purpose, and a life that feels genuinely theirs, have learned something that looks, from the outside, like indifference. They have learned to ignore the race, not because they are lazy or unmotivated, not because they have given up on ambition or settled for mediocrity, but because they understand something fundamental, something that changes everything once you truly grasp it. They understand that the race is a lie. This knowledge, this quiet realization, is what separates those who accumulate genuine peace and prosperity from those who spend their entire lives chasing validation they will never catch. The people who build lasting wealth do not spend their energy trying to keep up. They do not panic when someone else gets ahead. They do not reshape their entire strategy every time a new success story appears on their feed. They have stepped out of the comparison game entirely, not because they do not care about success, but because they have redefined what success actually means. And this is the truth that will set you free if you can accept it. The gap you are measuring is not real. The timeline you are comparing yourself to does not exist outside of your own mind. The race you think you are losing was never designed for you to win because it was never your race to begin with. It was constructed from fragments of other people's lives, stitched together into an impossible standard that serves no one except those who profit from your anxiety. What if you could step out of that race? What if you could build wealth, success, and a life of meaning without constantly looking over your shoulder to see who is ahead or behind? What if the path to financial freedom is not about moving faster, but about moving differently, on your own terms, at your own pace, toward destinations you have chosen for yourself? This is not about lowering your ambitions. This is about raising your awareness. And it begins with understanding why the race was never real in the first place. When you feel behind, your first instinct is always the same. You want to speed up. You want to work harder, longer, faster. You want to take bigger risks, make bolder moves, do whatever it takes to make up for what you perceive as lost time. This impulse feels rational in the moment. It feels like the only logical response to the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. But here is the truth that most people learn too late. This logic destroys people. It does not save them. It does not catch them up. It burns them out, empties their bank accounts, fractures their relationships, and leaves them more exhausted and more behind than when they started. The problem is not effort. The problem is not ambition. The problem is that you are running a race that was never designed for you, measuring yourself against a standard that was never yours to begin with. You are comparing your messy, complicated, deeply personal journey, with all its detours and setbacks and quiet victories that no one sees, to someone else's highlight reel. You are looking at their polished exterior and assuming that their path is the right path, the path you somehow missed or failed to take. And in doing so, you are building your entire strategy on a foundation of illusion. Napoleon Hill, in his classic work Think and Grow Rich, wrote, "The starting point of all achievement is desire. But desire without direction becomes desperation, and desperation makes poor decisions. When you are running scared, when you are trying to close a gap that exists only in your mind, you do not think clearly. You chase opportunities that look impressive but do not align with your values. You say yes to things that drain you because you think you are supposed to. You spend money to signal success you have not yet achieved. You pivot every 6 months because someone else's strategy looks better than yours. And all the while, you are moving further away from the life you actually want. Millionaires who last, the ones who build wealth that survives recessions and market crashes and personal crises, the ones who sleep well at night and enjoy their lives, have stepped out of this toxic comparison game entirely. They have made a conscious decision to stop playing a game that turns every achievement into a referendum on their worth, every setback into evidence of their inadequacy. They have realized that the scoreboard they were watching was not measuring anything real, and in that realization, they found freedom. These people no longer ask themselves, "Am I ahead or behind?" They no longer scroll through social media, tallying wins and losses, calculating their position relative to peers and strangers. Instead, they ask completely different questions. They ask, "Am I better than I was last year?" They ask, "What am I building that will matter in 10 years?" They ask, "Am I moving toward the life I actually want, or am I just reacting to what I see around me?" These questions might sound simple, but they represent a fundamental shift in perspective. They represent a quiet revolution in how success is defined and pursued. This is not semantics. This is not just a matter of positive thinking or reframing your mindset. This is the difference between those who accumulate real wealth and those who spend their entire lives chasing it. Because when you stop measuring yourself against others, something miraculous begins to happen. You stop making decisions out of fear. You stop chasing opportunities just because they look good on paper or sound impressive at dinner parties. You stop burning energy on things that do not matter. Stop overcomplicating simple choices. Stop second-guessing yourself because you are no longer looking over your shoulder to see what everyone else is doing. Instead, you start moving at your own pace. You start building according to your own blueprint. You start investing in things that align with your actual goals rather than someone else's idea of success. And in that shift, in that quiet recalibration of purpose, you find something that most people never experience in their entire lives. You find clarity, not the temporary clarity that comes from a motivational video or a weekend seminar, but the deep, unshakable clarity that comes from knowing exactly what you are building and why it matters. This clarity is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not look impressive from the outside, but it is the foundation of every fortune that lasts, every life that feels genuinely fulfilling. When you have clarity, you do not need to compare. You do not need constant validation. You do not need to know where you rank. You simply know where you are going, and you trust that your path, messy and imperfect as it may be, is taking you there. This is where real wealth begins, not in the hustle, not in the race, but in the quiet confidence of someone who has stopped running and started building. Let me be very clear about something, because this idea is often misunderstood. When I talk about stepping out of the race, about ignoring comparison and moving at your own pace, I am not suggesting that you lower your standards. I am not advocating for complacency or mediocrity or giving up on your dreams. The millionaires I am describing, the ones who have learned to ignore the noise and build real, lasting wealth, work harder than almost anyone you know. But their work is different. It is not frantic. It is not reactive. It does not come from a place of panic or desperation or the fear of being left behind. Their work is fueled by something deeper, something quieter. It is fueled by the knowledge that wealth is not a sprint to some imaginary finish line. Wealth is a long, patient accumulation of decisions made when no one is watching, when no one is applauding, when there is no immediate payoff or validation. It is the discipline of saving money month after month, even though it does not feel exciting. It is the patience of holding an investment through volatility when everyone else is selling in panic. It is the courage to keep building a business that will take years to pay off, years during which you will look from the outside like you are not winning at all. As James Clear writes in Atomic Habits, you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And the system that builds wealth is not glamorous. It is not Instagram-worthy. It is the compounding effect of showing up in ways that do not produce immediate validation, trusting the process even when it looks boring, even when it feels like nothing is happening. It is the quiet consistency of someone who understands that real results do not announce themselves in real time. They reveal themselves slowly, almost invisibly, until one day you look back and realize how far you have actually come. But here is where most people break. And they do not break because they lack talent or intelligence or opportunity. They break because they cannot tolerate the gap between effort and recognition. They cannot tolerate the silence. They put in the work for 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, and when the world does not immediately acknowledge their progress, when their bank account does not transform overnight, when their peers are still getting more attention and more applause, they lose faith. They start to question whether their plan was ever any good in the first place. So they pivot. They abandon the strategy they committed to 6 months ago because someone else's strategy suddenly looks better. They chase the next shiny thing, the hot stock, the trending business model, the shortcut everyone is talking about. They take on debt to look successful, to keep up appearances, to signal that they are winning even when they are not. And eventually, they burn out, not because they were not capable of success, but because they were running someone else's race at someone else's pace, constantly checking the scoreboard, constantly adjusting their trajectory based on what everyone around them was doing. Meanwhile, the real millionaires, the ones who build fortunes that last, just keep building. Quietly, consistently, without fanfare. While everyone else is posting about their wins, performing their success, curating their image, these people are doing the unsexy work that actually compounds. They are reinvesting profits instead of upgrading their lifestyle. They are learning instead of celebrating. They are building systems instead of chasing outcomes. And to the outside world, to people who are still stuck in the comparison game, it looks like they are falling behind. It looks like they are not keeping up. It looks like they are missing out. But they are not missing out. They are opting out. And there is a profound difference between the two. Missing out implies that there is something valuable happening that you are not part of. Opting out means you have consciously chosen a different path because you understand that the thing everyone else is chasing is not actually valuable. It is just loud. It is just visible. It is just designed to look like success without requiring the substance of success. Here is the paradox that almost no one talks about. The thing that will make you wealthy is often the exact thing that makes you look like you are falling behind. The discipline of living below your means while your peers are upgrading their cars and homes. The patience of building a business for 5 years while others are job hopping for salary increases. The wisdom of staying invested during a downturn while everyone else is panicking and selling. These decisions do not look impressive in the moment. They do not generate applause. They do not get likes or comments or admiration. In fact, they often generate the opposite: confusion, concern, maybe even pity from people who think you are not keeping up. But wealth is not built in the spotlight. It is built in the silence. It is built in the unglamorous, repetitive, often boring work of showing up every single day and making the right decision even when no one is watching, even when there is no reward, even when it feels like you are not making progress. And if you can learn to tolerate that silence, if you can find peace in the gap between effort and recognition, you will build something that most people never do. You will build something real, something that lasts, something that does not require constant validation because it is grounded in substance, not performance. There is a kind of invisibility to real wealth building that most people simply cannot handle. It does not photograph well. It does not translate into likes or shares, or the kind of social currency that makes you feel validated at the end of a long day. It is not impressive at dinner parties. In fact, if you tried to describe it to someone, if you tried to explain what you are actually doing with your money and your time, they would probably look at you with a mix of confusion and concern. They might wonder if you are okay, if you are falling behind, if you have given up on having the kind of life they think everyone should want. This invisibility is not an accident. It is a feature, not a bug. Real wealth building is the discipline of saving money every month while your peers are upgrading their lifestyles, buying new cars, moving into bigger homes, taking expensive vacations that they document extensively online. It is the patience of holding investments through volatility, through market crashes and corrections, while everyone around you is panicking and selling and telling you that you are making a mistake. It is the courage to start a business that will take 5, maybe 10 years to pay off, years during which you will not have much to show for your effort, except exhaustion and a bank account that does not look all that different from when you started. Morgan Housel, in The Psychology of Money, reminds us, spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. And yet, this is exactly what most people do, because the alternative, building wealth in silence, in obscurity, without validation, feels unbearable. It feels like losing. It feels like you are doing something wrong, like you missed the memo on how to live a successful life in the modern world. But here is what the real wealth builders understand. Here is what they have accepted that most people never will. Wealth is not built in the spotlight. It is built in the margins, in the small, unremarkable decisions that no one notices and no one celebrates. It is built in the consistency that does not make headlines, in the daily habits that do not inspire awe or admiration. It is built when you choose to pack your lunch instead of eating out, when you drive your paid-off car for another 3 years instead of upgrading, when you say no to the weekend trip because you are putting that money toward your investment account instead. These decisions are boring. They are unglamorous. They do not generate the dopamine hit that comes from a new purchase, or the social validation that comes from sharing your wins online. And because they are boring, because they do not feed the part of you that craves recognition and applause, most people abandon them. They cannot tolerate the invisibility. They cannot stand the feeling of working hard, of making sacrifices, of doing the right thing financially, and having absolutely nothing to show for it in the short term. No one sees, no one knows, no one cares, and so they pivot. They start looking for faster paths, for shortcuts, for the thing that will produce visible results right now. They take on debt to fund a lifestyle that looks successful. They invest in whatever is trending because at least that gives them something to talk about. They abandon the slow, patient accumulation of wealth in favor of the performance of wealth. And in doing so, they guarantee that they will never actually build anything that lasts. If you cannot tolerate that invisibility, if you need the world to see your progress in real time, if you need validation before the thing is finished, you will never build anything substantial. This is not a judgment. It is simply a reality. Because the kind of wealth that survives recessions and market crashes and personal crises, the kind of wealth that provides actual freedom and security is built in obscurity. It is built when no one is watching. It is built through decisions that do not announce themselves, that do not seek applause, that simply compound quietly over years and decades. Here is the paradox that almost no one wants to accept. The very thing that creates wealth often requires you to appear as though you are losing the race everyone else is running. While your friends are celebrating promotions and new homes and luxury purchases, you are living in a modest apartment and driving an old car and putting every spare dollar into investments that will not pay off for years. While your peers are posting vacation photos from exotic locations, you are staying home, working on your business, building something that does not yet look like much of anything. While everyone around you is measuring their worth by their possessions and their status, you are measuring your worth by your net worth, by your freedom, by the options you are quietly creating for yourself. From the outside, it looks like you are not keeping up. It looks like you are missing out. It looks like you are somehow less successful, less ambitious, less alive than everyone else. And this perception creates a tension that most people cannot bear. How can you embrace obscurity when everything in you craves recognition? How can you choose invisibility when the world rewards visibility? How can you stay quiet when everyone else is shouting about their achievements? The answer is simple, but it is not easy. You embrace obscurity by knowing something that the crowd does not know. You know that what looks impressive is not usually what creates lasting value. You know that the loudest voices are often the ones with the least substance. You know that real wealth whispers while fake wealth shouts. And you trust that if you can tolerate the silence long enough, if you can endure the invisibility long enough, your consistency will compound into something that no amount of performance can match. When you finally decide to stop comparing yourself to others, when you make the conscious choice to step out of the race and focus on your own path, something unexpected happens. At first, it does not feel like freedom. It feels like loss. There is a disorientation that sets in, a kind of vertigo that comes from suddenly having no external reference point. You have spent so long measuring yourself against others, so long using their milestones as your compass, that when you remove that framework, you feel unmoored. Who are you if you are not ahead or behind? What does success even mean if it is not relative to someone else's achievements? The ground beneath you feels unstable, and everything in you wants to reach out and grab onto something familiar, something solid. Most people retreat at this exact moment. They cannot handle the uncertainty. The discomfort of not knowing where they stand is too much to bear. So they dive right back into the comparison game, because at least there, the rules are clear. At least there, you know what winning looks like, even if you are losing. At least there, you have a scoreboard to check, a way to measure your worth, a distraction from the harder questions about what you actually want and why you want it. And so they return to scrolling, to comparing, to that familiar cycle of anxiety and inadequacy that feels terrible, but also strangely comfortable because it is known. But if you can sit with that discomfort, if you can tolerate the vertigo without reaching for the familiar handrails of comparison, something remarkable begins to shift. It does not happen overnight. It is not a sudden revelation or a dramatic transformation. It is subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but slowly, you start to notice things you never noticed before. You start to see opportunities that were always there, but that you were too busy chasing other people's goals to recognize. You start to make decisions based on what you actually want rather than what you think you should want. You start to ask yourself questions that matter. What do I care about? What kind of life am I trying to build? What would make me feel fulfilled, not just successful? As Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." And that accomplishment begins the moment you stop letting other people's paths dictate your own. You start to enjoy the process. And this might be the most surprising part of all. The work you are doing, the business you are building, the investments you are making, they no longer feel like a race you are losing. They feel like your work, your business, your investments. They belong to you in a way they never did when you were just trying to keep up with everyone else. And here is what no one tells you, what sounds almost too good to be true, but is absolutely accurate. You start to move faster, not in the frantic, exhausting way of someone who is trying to catch up, but in the quiet, focused way of someone who knows exactly where they are going and is not distracted by every detour, every shiny object, every person who seems to be ahead. You have a destination in mind, a vision that is yours, and every decision you make is in service of that vision. There is no wasted energy, no second guessing, no constant recalibration based on what someone else is doing. You stop wasting time on things that do not matter. You stop saying yes to opportunities just because they look impressive, or because you think you are supposed to. You stop overcomplicating simple decisions because you are no longer paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong choice, of falling further behind, of choosing the path that does not lead to the kind of success everyone else is celebrating. You stop second-guessing yourself because you are no longer looking over your shoulder, no longer measuring your progress against someone else's timeline. This is when something extraordinary happens. You become unstoppable, not because you are racing, not because you are working harder or hustling more than everyone else, but because you are no longer in a race at all. You are on your own path, moving at your own pace, building something that matters to you. And because you are no longer distracted, no longer depleting your energy on comparison and anxiety and constant course correction, you have more focus, more clarity, more power than you ever had when you were trying to keep up. People around you might not understand. They might still see you through the lens of the race, wondering why you are not chasing the same things they are, why you are not celebrating the same milestones, why you seem so unconcerned with where you rank. But you are not unconcerned. You simply care about different things now. You care about substance over appearance, about long-term wealth over short-term validation, about building a life that feels true to who you are rather than impressive to people who do not really know you. This shift, this quiet revolution in how you approach your life and your wealth, does not make you complacent. It makes you powerful. It makes you clear. It makes you free in a way that most people never experience because they never stop running long enough to ask themselves where they are actually trying to go. And once you have that clarity, once you have stepped out of the race and onto your own path, you realize something profound. The only person you were ever racing against was yourself. And the only way to win that race is to stop running it. There is a story I want to share with you, and while I cannot verify every detail, the truth it contains is more important than whether it happened exactly this way. A young investor, ambitious and eager, manages to secure a meeting with a legendary billionaire. This is someone who has built unimaginable wealth, someone whose name is synonymous with success, someone who has navigated decades of markets and economies and emerged not just wealthy, but wise. The young investor comes prepared with questions, with notebooks, with a hunger to extract some secret formula that will accelerate his own journey. He sits across from this titan of industry and finally asks the question that has been burning in his mind. What should I be doing right now? What is the move I need to make to get ahead? The billionaire does not answer immediately. He looks at the young man for a long time, studying him with the kind of patience that comes from having seen this exact conversation play out 1,000 times before. And then he says something that the young investor did not expect, something that feels more like a riddle than advice. The most valuable thing I can tell you is this: stop asking that question. The young investor is confused. He came for strategy, for tactics, for the insider knowledge that would give him an edge. He came for the shortcut, the secret move, the thing that successful people know that he does not. And instead, he is being told to stop asking the very question he thought was the smart one, the ambitious one, the question that separated people who wanted success from people who were merely curious about it. But the billionaire continues, and his words cut through the noise of everything the young man has been taught about ambition and achievement. Every time you ask what you should be doing, he says, you are comparing yourself to some invisible standard. You are assuming there is a right answer, a correct timeline, a move that successful people make that you are missing. And as long as you are asking that question, you will always feel behind, because the question itself is the problem. This is not what most people want to hear. We have been conditioned to believe that success comes from finding the right answers, from studying what successful people do and replicating their strategies. We have been taught that there is a formula, a sequence of steps that, if followed correctly, will lead us to the same destination. And so, we ask the question over and over in different forms to different mentors. What should I be doing? What am I missing? What do I need to change to catch up? But here is the insight that changes everything if you can truly absorb it. People who build real wealth are not asking what they should be doing. They are not constantly surveying the landscape to see what everyone else is up to, trying to identify the trend they need to jump on or the strategy they need to adopt. They are asking a completely different question. They are asking, what do I want to build? And then they are building it, regardless of what anyone else is doing, regardless of whether it looks impressive, regardless of whether it aligns with the current definition of success. In The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith observed that self-interest, when properly directed, creates prosperity. But the key phrase is properly directed. Your self-interest must be directed by your own values, your own vision, your own definition of what matters. When your self-interest is directed by comparison, by the fear of falling behind, by the need to match or exceed what others are doing, it becomes a prison rather than a compass. This teaching, this simple reframing of the question you ask yourself, offers no blueprint. It gives you no 5-step formula to follow. It makes no promise that if you do X, Y, and Z, you will be a millionaire in 3 years. And that is precisely why most people dismiss it. They want the map, the plan, the guarantee. They want to be told exactly what to do so they do not have to sit with the uncertainty of figuring it out themselves. But what this teaching offers is something far more valuable than a blueprint. It offers freedom. Freedom from the exhausting performance of success, where every decision is made with an audience in mind, where every achievement must be documented and validated and compared. Freedom from the constant anxiety of comparison, from the endless scrolling and measuring and calculating of where you stand relative to everyone else. Freedom from the suffocating belief that your worth is measured by someone else's timeline, by milestones you did not choose, by a definition of success that was handed to you rather than created by you. This freedom is not passive. It is not about doing less or caring less or lowering your ambitions. It is about redirecting your energy toward something that actually belongs to you. It is about building wealth, yes, but building it on your own terms, at your own pace, in your own way. It is about making decisions that serve your life rather than your image. It is about investing in things that compound over decades rather than things that impress over weekends. When you stop asking what you should be doing and start asking what you want to build, everything changes. The noise fades. The urgency dissipates. The race that once felt so real, so pressing, so unavoidable, reveals itself to be the illusion it always was. And in the space that opens up, in the clarity that emerges, you finally have room to create something that matters. Not because it looks good, not because it will make you look like you are winning, but because it is yours. This freedom I have been describing, the freedom from comparison, from constant measurement, from the exhausting performance of success, is not just emotionally liberating. It is financially liberating in the most practical, measurable sense. Because here is what happens when you stop making decisions out of fear, out of envy, out of the desperate need to keep up or catch up. You make better decisions. Not morally better, not more virtuous, but objectively better for your long-term financial health and stability. When you are not driven by the anxiety of falling behind, you take better risks. You evaluate opportunities based on their actual merit, on whether they align with your goals and values, rather than on whether they will make you look successful or help you close the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. You build better businesses because you are not rushing to launch something before it is ready just to prove you are an entrepreneur. You are not pivoting every 6 months because someone else's business model looks more impressive than yours. You stay the course. You refine. You improve. You build something solid rather than something flashy. You invest with patience instead of panic. When the market drops, you do not sell in a frenzy because everyone else is selling or because you are terrified of falling further behind. You hold, you wait, you maybe even buy more because you understand that volatility is not the enemy of wealth, it is the friend of the patient. And perhaps, most importantly, you save money instead of spending it to impress people who do not actually care about you. People who are too busy worrying about their own image to notice yours. And in doing all of this, in making these unglamorous, unremarkable, deeply wise decisions, you become quietly and without announcement wealthy. Not because you worked harder than everyone else, not because you were smarter or luckier or had some secret knowledge they lacked, but because you learned to ignore the race. You learn to tune out the noise. You learn to measure your progress by your own metrics rather than by the ever-shifting standards of the crowd. Let me offer you an image that captures this perfectly. Consider the gardener who plants an oak tree. In the first year, it looks like almost nothing, just a sapling, thin and fragile, barely noticeable in the landscape. Meanwhile, the neighboring flowers bloom in brilliant colors, attracting attention, drawing admiration, making the garden look alive and vibrant and successful. If you were to judge the gardener's work in that first year, you might think they made a poor choice. Why plant an oak when you could plant flowers that bloom immediately? Why invest in something that will not show results for years, maybe decades? But beneath the surface, where no one can see, the oak is building roots. Deep, strong, expansive roots that spread through the soil, anchoring the tree, preparing it for the growth that is coming. The flowers, beautiful as they are, have shallow roots. They are designed for immediate impact, for seasonal brilliance. And that is fine. There is a place for flowers. But the flowers will fade in a season. They will wilt and die and need to be replanted. The oak, on the other hand, will stand for centuries. It will provide shade for generations. It will become a landmark, a piece of the landscape that people cannot imagine being without. As the ancient Chinese proverb teaches us, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. The oak stands for centuries, not because it rushed, not because it compared itself to the flowers, but because it ignored the comparison entirely and grew at its own pace, on its own timeline, according to its own nature. This is how real wealth operates. It operates on the timeline of oak trees, not flowers. It is built slowly, invisibly, through decisions that do not produce immediate gratification or validation. It is built in the quiet accumulation of assets, in the patient compounding of returns, in the discipline of living below your means year after year, even when no one notices or applauds. And yet, we are conditioned to celebrate the flowers. We are taught to admire the quick wins, the explosive growth, the overnight success stories. We are encouraged to question the slow, invisible growth, to wonder if it is actually working, to doubt whether the oak will ever become what it promises to be. This is the paradox that sits at the heart of everything I have been telling you. Letting go of the need to appear successful is precisely what makes lasting success possible. The more you can tolerate obscurity, The more you can embrace the invisibility of real wealth building, the more likely you are to actually build something that lasts. The people who need constant validation, who need to see results immediately, who need the world to acknowledge their progress in real time. They are planting flowers. And there is nothing wrong with flowers, but flowers do not build generational wealth. Flowers do not provide financial freedom. Flowers do not create the kind of life where you wake up without anxiety, where you make decisions based on what you want rather than what you can afford, where you have options instead of obligations. The oak does not need applause. It does not need anyone to notice how well it is growing. It just grows, silently and steadily, trusting the process, trusting the timeline, trusting that the roots it is building today will support the tree it will become tomorrow. And if you can adopt that same patience, that same trust, that same willingness to be underestimated and overlooked while you build something real, you will discover what the millionaires have always known. The race was never real, but the oak is. So let me answer the question that has been hovering over this entire conversation. What do millionaires actually do when they feel behind? Because they do feel it. Let us be clear about this. They are not superhuman. They are not above the emotions that plague the rest of us. They scroll through social media and see someone younger who has already achieved what they are still working toward. They go to dinner parties and hear success stories that make their own progress seem slow or insignificant. They lie awake at night sometimes, doing the math, wondering if they are on track, questioning whether they have made the right choices. They feel behind. They feel the weight of comparison. They are human. But here is the difference. The thing that separates them from everyone else who is drowning in that same feeling. They do not let it dictate their decisions. They feel behind, and then they pause. They sit with the feeling instead of immediately reacting to it. And in that pause, they ask themselves a series of questions that most people never think to ask. They ask, behind what? Behind whom? According to whose timeline? Whose definition of success am I using right now? Is this even a race I want to be running? And in the asking of these questions, something shifts. The feeling begins to lose its power. Because when you interrogate comparison, when you really examine it, it falls apart. You realize that the person you are comparing yourself to had advantages you did not have, or made sacrifices you were not willing to make, or got lucky in ways that had nothing to do with their skill or effort. You realize that their timeline is not your timeline. Their goals are not your goals. Their version of success might not be something you even want if you really thought about it. And in that realization, you are free to return to your own plan, your own goals, your own definition of what success looks like for your life. They keep building, not frantically, not desperately trying to make up for lost time, not pivoting every few months because someone else's strategy suddenly looks better. They keep building steadily, quietly, with the patience of someone who understands something fundamental. Wealth is not a destination you arrive at on schedule. It is not a finish line you cross at a predetermined time. It is a direction you move in day after day, year after year, regardless of the pace, regardless of the noise around you, regardless of who appears to be ahead or behind. Robert Kiyosaki writes in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, "The single most powerful asset we all have is our mind. If it is trained well, it can create enormous wealth. And training your mind begins with training it to ask the right questions, to resist the urgency that comparison creates, to stay focused on your own path even when everyone else seems to be on a different one. The world profits from your urgency." This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a simple economic reality. Every advertisement you see, every algorithm that feeds you content, every influencer selling you a course on fast success, they need you to feel behind. They need you to believe that time is running out, that opportunities are slipping away, that if you do not act now, right now, you will be left behind forever. This urgency is the product they are selling, and your anxiety is what keeps them in business. Think about it. The entire modern economy is built on making you feel inadequate, so you will buy the solution. You feel behind financially, so you buy the course promising wealth in 90 days. You feel behind professionally, so you pay for the seminar that will teach you the secrets of successful people. You feel behind socially, so you upgrade your lifestyle, take on debt, perform success you have not actually achieved. Every industry, from finance to fashion to self-improvement, has a vested interest in keeping you locked in the comparison game, in making sure you never step off the treadmill long enough to ask yourself whether you even want what you are chasing. This is the greatest con of our age, and it is so pervasive, so normalized, that most people never recognize it for what it is. The con is this: you are running out of time. The con is there is a boat, and it is leaving, and if you are not on it, you will miss your chance forever. The con is everyone else is ahead, and you are falling behind, and you need to hurry, 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 or you will never catch up. But here is the truth that no one is selling, because there is no profit in it. You are not running out of time. There is no boat to miss. There is no single timeline that everyone is supposed to follow. No universal schedule for when you should reach certain milestones. There is only your life unfolding at its own pace, full of its own opportunities and challenges and possibilities, waiting patiently for you to stop comparing and start building something that actually matters to you. The millionaires understand this. They have seen through the con. They know that the urgency is manufactured, that the scarcity is artificial, that the race is a construct designed to keep you consuming and chasing and never quite arriving. And so they opt out. Not out of life, not out of ambition, but out of the toxic game that confuses activity with progress, noise with substance, performance with actual wealth. They return to their own plan again and again, no matter how many times the world tries to pull them back into comparison. And in that return, in that steady commitment to their own path, they build something real, something that lasts, something that is actually theirs. I want you to take a moment and imagine something with me. Imagine a version of your life where you are no longer measuring yourself against others, where you wake up in the morning and the first question that enters your mind is not, "Am I where I should be?" or "Am I falling behind?" but rather, "What do I want to build today?" Imagine the lightness of that shift, the freedom in asking a question that is entirely yours, that does not require you to check anyone else's progress before you can answer it. This is not a small change. This is a fundamental reordering of how you move through the world. Imagine making financial decisions based on your actual goals, rather than on what will look impressive or what everyone else is doing. Imagine choosing investments, not because they are the hot trend or because someone on the internet promised they would make you rich quickly, but because they align with your values, your timeline, your vision for the future you are creating. Imagine building a business because you genuinely believe in it, because it solves a problem you care about, because it allows you to create something meaningful, not because you need to prove to yourself or anyone else that you are successful, that you are keeping up, that you are not falling behind. The energy you would reclaim from this shift is staggering. Think about how much mental space you currently dedicate to comparison, How many hours you spend scrolling through other people's achievements, calculating the gap between their lives and yours, wondering what you are doing wrong or what you need to do differently. Think about the anxiety that hums in the background of almost every decision you make. The voice that asks, "But what will people think?" Or, "Is this enough?" Or, "Am I on track?" Now imagine all of that energy, all of that mental bandwidth suddenly available for something else. For creation instead of comparison. For building instead of worrying. For presence instead of anxiety. The peace that comes from stepping out of the race is not a fantasy. This is not some utopian vision that only works in theory. This is what actually happens when you choose your own path and commit to it, when you stop letting other people's timelines dictate your own. And here is the twist that almost no one expects. When you stop trying to catch up, you often end up ahead. Not ahead in the comparison game, you are done playing that game, but ahead in the sense that you have built something substantial, something real, something that actually serves your life. You end up ahead not because you were chasing anyone, but because you were consistent, because you were focused, because you were not constantly distracted by what everyone else was doing or constantly adjusting your strategy based on whose success looked most impressive at any given moment. You stayed the course. You built something real. And real things, genuine wealth, lasting success, they take time. They take the kind of time that most people waste looking over their shoulders at others, trying to figure out if they are winning or losing, trying to decide if they need to change direction because someone else seems to be getting there faster. Paulo Coelho reminds us in The Alchemist, when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it. But the universe cannot conspire on your behalf if you keep changing what you want based on what everyone else is achieving. The universe needs you to be clear, to be committed, to stay on your path long enough for things to unfold. Now, I am not suggesting that the feeling of comparison will disappear entirely. You are human. You will still have moments when you see someone else's success and feel that familiar tightening in your chest, that whisper of inadequacy or envy or anxiety. But here is what changes when you step out of the race, your relationship to that feeling. You begin to understand that the feeling is information, not instruction. It is telling you that comparison is active in your mind right now. It is not telling you that you need to run faster, change your plan, or question everything you are doing. What changes is not the feeling itself, but what you do with it. You can acknowledge it. You can notice it the way you would notice a passing cloud or a bird flying overhead, with awareness, but without assigning it so much significance. You can say to yourself, "Yes, I see that person's success. And yes, it brings up feelings for me." And then you can make a conscious choice. You can choose to let that feeling pull you off your path, or you can choose to acknowledge it and continue building what you were building before you saw it. You can choose your own pace, your own timeline, your own definition of what matters. This is not about suppressing emotions or pretending you do not care about success. This is about developing the wisdom to distinguish between the feelings that serve you and the feelings that sabotage you, between the information that helps you grow and the noise that distracts you from your purpose. And the more you practice this, the more you choose your own path despite the feelings that arise, the more natural it becomes. The more peaceful your relationship with your own ambition becomes. And the more you realize that the only race worth running is the one between who you are today and who you want to become tomorrow. There is a profound relief that washes over you when you finally realize deeply and completely that your worth is not determined by where you rank on an imaginary scoreboard that no one is actually keeping. Think about that for a moment. All the anxiety, all the sleepless nights, all the frantic effort to keep up. It is all in service of a competition that exists almost entirely in your own mind. The people you imagine are watching you, judging your progress, tallying your wins and losses against their own. They are not doing that. They are too busy worrying about their own race, their own rankings, their own fear of falling behind. They are scrolling through your life the same way you scroll through theirs, making quick judgments and moving on, too consumed by their own comparison spiral to actually care about yours. This realization, when it truly lands, is liberating in a way that is difficult to describe unless you have experienced it. It is like putting down a heavy backpack you have been carrying for so long that you forgot it was even there. Suddenly, you can breathe more deeply. You can move more freely. You can make decisions without the constant weight of wondering how they will be perceived, whether they will make you look successful, whether they will close the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. And when you release the need to be impressive, something unexpected happens. You discover what you actually want, not what you think you should want, not what looks good on paper or sounds ambitious at dinner parties, but what genuinely calls to you, what lights you up, what feels true when no one else is watching. And sometimes, often even, what you actually want is quieter than you expected, slower, smaller. It does not fit the narrative of hustle and scale and explosive growth that the world celebrates. It might be building a modest business that gives you freedom instead of a massive company that consumes your life. It might be accumulating wealth slowly and steadily instead of swinging for the fences with high-risk ventures. It might be prioritizing time with your family over maximizing your income or creative fulfillment over career prestige. There is a kind of wealth that exists in the space between ambition and peace, and it is the wealth of knowing you are building the right thing for you, even if no one else understands it, even if people look at your choices with confusion or concern, even if your path does not fit neatly into the categories of success that society recognizes and rewards. This wealth is internal. It is the wealth of alignment, of integrity, of being able to look at your life and feel that it is genuinely yours, that you are not performing someone else's script or living up to someone else's expectations. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And part of that power is the power to define your own metrics for success, to decide what matters to you independently of what matters to everyone else. This journey you are on, it is not about arriving. It is not about reaching some final destination where you can exhale and declare that you have made it, that you have won, that you can finally stop striving. This journey is about becoming someone who no longer needs to arrive, someone who finds meaning in the making rather than in the made, in the building rather than in the built, in the growing rather than in having grown. It is about cultivating a relationship with your work, your wealth, your life that is based on process rather than outcome, on direction rather than destination. And in the silence between comparisons, in those moments when you are not measuring yourself against anyone else, something remarkable happens. You hear your own voice again, that quiet inner voice that knows what you really want, what really matters to you, what path is actually yours to walk. It has been there all along, but it has been drowned out by the noise of comparison, by the constant chatter of the world telling you who you should be and what you should achieve. And when you create space for that voice, when you give it permission to guide you, you realize it has been waiting patiently, faithfully, for you to listen. The millionaires who have found both wealth and peace, who have built lives that feel as good as they look, they did not win by being louder than everyone else. They did not win by moving faster, or hustling harder, or making more noise about their achievements. They won by being truer to their own path, even when that path looked unremarkable to everyone else, even when their choices seemed boring or overly cautious or not ambitious enough, even when they had to sit through countless conversations where people questioned their strategy or suggested they were playing it too safe or wondered why they were not taking advantage of this opportunity or that trend. They won by trusting that their path, quiet and unglamorous as it might be, was the right path for them. They won by having the courage to disappoint the expectations of others in order to honor the vision they held for themselves. They won by understanding that success is not a performance for an audience, but a quiet conversation with yourself about whether you are building the life you actually want to live. And in that understanding, in that fundamental shift from external validation to internal alignment, they found something more valuable than any amount of wealth or recognition. They found peace, and from that peace, everything else followed. So here we are, at the place where everything I have been telling you converges into a single, simple truth. The race is not real, but your life is real. And it is waiting for you to stop running and start building with intention and clarity. This is not a platitude. This is not positive thinking or motivational fluff. This is the fundamental insight that separates those who accumulate genuine wealth and peace from those who spend their entire lives exhausted, anxious, and perpetually behind. The race, the comparison, the timeline, the imaginary scoreboard, it is a construct, a fiction, a story we tell ourselves that feels so real we forget we made it up. But your life, your choices, your days, your opportunities, these are real. And they are slipping by while you measure yourself against illusions. Every single moment you spend measuring yourself against someone else is a moment stolen from your own creation. Think about that. Every hour you spend scrolling through other people's achievements, every conversation where you calculate your position relative to your peers, every sleepless night where you tally up the gap between where you are and where you think you should be, that is time and energy that could have been invested in your own growth, your own vision, your own quiet accumulation of what actually matters. You are trading the substance of your life for the shadow of comparison. And the tragedy is that most people do not realize what they are trading until years have passed and they look back and wonder where all that time went. The people who build lasting wealth, the ones whose fortunes survive and grow across decades, are not the ones who sprint the hardest. They are not the ones who hustle the most, or make the most noise, or post the most updates about their wins. They are the ones who find their own path, their own pace, their own definition of what they are building, and then they walk that path long enough for compounding to work its magic. Because compounding, whether it is compound interest, compound knowledge, compound relationships, or compound habits, requires time. It requires consistency. It requires staying on the same path even when it looks boring, even when others seem to be getting ahead faster, even when no one is watching or applauding. Warren Buffett, one of the greatest wealth builders in history, once said, "The stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient." But this wisdom extends far beyond the stock market. Life itself is a device for transferring wealth, meaning, and fulfillment from the impatient to the patient, from those who are always chasing to those who are quietly building. Every single moment you spend measuring yourself against someone else is a moment stolen from your own creation. Think about that. Every hour you spend scrolling through other people's achievements, every conversation where you calculate your position relative to your peers, every sleepless night where you tally up the gap between where you are and where you think you should be, that is time and energy that could have been invested in your own growth, your own vision, your own quiet accumulation of what actually matters. You are trading the substance of your life for the shadow of comparison. And the tragedy is that most people do not realize what they are trading until years have passed and they look back and wonder where all that time went. The people who build lasting wealth, the ones whose fortunes survive and grow across decades, are not the ones who sprint the hardest. They are not the ones who hustle the most or make the most noise or post the most updates about their wins. They are the ones who find their own path, their own pace, their own definition of what they are building, and then they walk that path long enough for compounding to work its magic. Because compounding, whether it is compound interest, compound knowledge, compound relationships, or compound habits, requires time. It requires consistency. It requires staying on the same path even when it looks boring, even when others seem to be getting ahead faster, even when no one is watching or applauding. Warren Buffett, one of the greatest wealth builders in history, once said, "The stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient." But this wisdom extends far beyond the stock market. Life itself is a device for transferring wealth, meaning, and fulfillment from the impatient to the patient, from those who are always chasing to those who are quietly building. Here is something that will set you free if you can accept it. There is no falling behind when you are on your own timeline. The entire concept of being behind only makes sense in the context of a race. And if you are not racing, you cannot be behind. There is only moving forward or standing still. And both are choices you make consciously. When you are moving forward on your own path, at your own pace, toward your own goals, it does not matter what anyone else is doing. Their speed does not affect your progress. Their achievements do not diminish yours. Their timeline has nothing to do with yours. The most revolutionary act you can commit in a world obsessed with comparison is to build something meaningful in obscurity, to show up day after day, year after year, and do the work without needing the world to see it, to trust the process when there is no applause, no validation, no external confirmation that you are on the right track, to measure your progress by your own metrics, by whether you are learning, growing, improving, building, rather than by how you stack up against everyone else. This is revolutionary because it removes you from the game that keeps most people trapped. It frees you from the exhausting performance of success and allows you to focus on the substance of success. And here is the paradox that sits at the heart of everything. What you are chasing will always be ahead of you. That is the nature of chasing. The goalpost moves. The definition of enough changes. There is always someone doing more, achieving more, accumulating more. But what you are building, what you are constructing slowly and patiently through your daily choices, through your consistency, through your commitment to your own path, that is beneath you right now, holding you up, growing in ways you cannot see until years later when you look back and realize the foundation you have created. The oak tree does not see its own roots spreading through the soil. The millionaire who is genuinely wealthy does not always feel wealthy in the moment-to-moment grind of building. But years later, decades later, the roots have created a tree that cannot be toppled by any storm. The daily decisions have created a life that is resilient, free, and genuinely fulfilling. The millionaires who have figured this out, who have stepped out of the race and into their own path, they know this with certainty. Ignore the race, trust the direction, and let time reveal what consistency creates. They know that wealth is not about winning a competition. It is about making decisions today that your future self will thank you for. It is about building something that compounds, that grows, that becomes more valuable with time rather than less. And it is about having the patience and the wisdom to stay the course, even when the world is screaming at you to hurry up, to catch up, to keep up. Your life is not a race. It is a garden. And what you plant today with intention and care and patience will grow in ways you cannot yet imagine. So stop running, start planting, and trust that the harvest will come in its own time. The next time you feel behind, and you will feel behind because you are human, and this feeling is part of the human experience, I want you to pause. Do not try to outrun the feeling. Do not immediately reach for your phone to scroll through someone else's success story, looking for either inspiration or confirmation of your inadequacy. Do not start frantically making plans to catch up, to work harder, to finally close that gap. Just pause, and in that pause, ask yourself a simple question. Whose race am I running right now? Is this race mine, or have I adopted someone else's timeline, someone else's definition of success, someone else's path, and convinced myself it should be my own? And then, with whatever answer emerges, return to your own path, not because you are giving up on your dreams or lowering your standards or settling for less than you deserve, but because you have finally understood something that most people spend their entire lives never learning. The most valuable thing you can build is not a fortune that impresses strangers or a lifestyle that photographs well. The most valuable thing you can build is a life that does not need constant validation, a life that feels true and meaningful and yours, regardless of how it compares to anyone else's. Your pace is not wrong. It is not too slow or too cautious or too quiet. It is simply yours. And that is enough. That has always been enough. Thank you for listening to these reflections. May you build in silence, with patience and intention. May you trust the process even when no one else understands it. And may you arrive in your own time in peace.